Hey, thanks everybody for joining. Got to say thanks to all of our many sponsors. You can see them listed here. Denver Startup Week is a free week to check out different things happening in the Denver startup scene, all things tech, small business. So thank you to these big companies that make these small companies thrive in the city of Denver, and that we can connect and talk to each other about these interesting topics. And so with that, a few more sponsor slides. You can read all of them. I'm not going to read them to you, but great logos up there. And we'll get into our topics. So, hi, my name is Laura Decker. I have been coming to Denver Startup Week for 7 years. In 2016, I came to Denver Startup Week because I wanted to transition from my job at a brewery into technology. And so I hit it hard, and I came in with a lot of optimism. I had a folder full of resumes, and I was like ready to network my way into a job. I went into a lot of sessions, and they were over my head. I had no idea what people were talking about. They were speaking a language I didn't understand. I went to the job fair, and I was there early on, and I stayed until the end, and I didn't get a single follow-up phone call or email. It was really hard. And I left that space feeling really discouraged. And to be honest, like for a year, I faced a lot of those discouraging moments. But today, 7 years later, I'm a senior product manager at Twilio. As a product manager, I work on a product called Flex. It's a contact center platform that's on top of Twilio's communication services. It's my job as a product manager to design how the application and how the features should work, so the engineers know how to develop it. I represent the customer. It's my job to know the customer intimately and represent them at every corner. I do competitive research to see what's going on in the market, and I work with other people in the business, sales and marketing, to launch our products. I work with a lot of brilliant people, and recently I was named the primary inventor on one of Twilio's patent proposals. 7 years ago, yeah, thank you.
That's awesome.
7 years ago, I left this conference crying because I thought that was impossible. And so for you in the audience who might be feeling the same way, that's why we're doing this today. I don't think I'm special. I know I'm lucky, and I've had a lot of privileges that have helped me get where I am, but I'm not doing anything incredible. I don't have any magic secret. I think this is a very attainable goal. And to prove it, I brought 4 people who've done similar journeys. And they're not special either, though I think they're pretty great. I think y'all are pretty great, but there's no magic about it. And so really excited to have these 4 people next to me to also tell their story and answer some of your questions as well. So I'm going to do a little question and answer with the panel up front. And then if you have questions, please save them for the end. We'll have a few minutes and a podium over there where we can line up and you can ask your own questions. So with that, I would love to introduce our panelists. First, I'm going to introduce you to Alex Garza. Alex, can you tell me a little bit about what your job is?
Yeah. Hello, this is Leah.
You gotta turn it on.
Oh, I have to turn it on.
Yep.
What's up? Whoa. Fancy. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I also work at Twilio, and I work in operations specifically, currently in fraud and abuse. So any of those pesky text messages you get, that is spam, or that fishy email, that comes through me, and I shut it down. And so that's what I do now. I started off as, I've done everything. I worked at the YMCA, I worked at Whole Foods as a grocer, did the cheesemongering thing for a little bit. I was a barista for like 6 years, ran a juice bar in Austin, and so I've covered a lot of bases. And so yeah, that's my history.
Cool. And tell me a little bit about like getting acclimated into technology after coming back from that background.
Yeah, so I was a little bit lucky. I was a lot lucky, actually. I, as a barista, got to know my customers every day, making their lattes. And I had one specifically, and I had his latte ready every day, 8 a.m. And I did not know that he worked for Facebook. So one day he approached me and said, hey, I think you should apply for this contracting job and come work for me at Facebook. And so I never really went into, I didn't even think working in tech or having a job like this was possible. I did not go to college. I do not have a 4-year degree. And so for me, it was somebody seeing something in me and then me being able to have the confidence to say, I might fail at this, but I'll give it a shot. And so to me, that's probably one of the most important things is just going in. You're going to fail at some point, but just being willing to give it a shot is what it comes from.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Alex. Next on our panel, we have Andrew Shahan. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all good.
This
Yeah.
is.
She's in practice. No, it's
Irish.
Andrew Shahan. I'm
Shahan.
Irish, Scotch-Irish.
Andrew
You can say Shahan, that's fine.
I've been pronouncing it wrong in my head for so long.
It's okay.
It's going to take me some time. Andrew, tell me a little bit about what your job is. What do you do?
Yeah, so today I am the lead of developer relations at a company called Daily Pay. It's a startup based out of New York, and my job, I'll try to break this down really simply. Let's say there's an app out there called Money App, and it lets you transfer money to a friend. Well, you can only do that in Money App. My job as a developer relations person is to help other developers at other companies put that functionality inside of their app. So think like PayPal, you can buy goods and services with PayPal. So basically I do that with my job. I did not start there, but I think some of the other questions will dive into that.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about like getting acclimated into tech.
Oh yeah, acclimation. So that's a tough one. You're always going to feel like you don't belong at first. I was around a ton of smart engineers. I started out actually at an IT help desk. So I studied for a certification and started applying to jobs. I reached out to Loose Connections to say, hey, I'm looking for a job in IT. I'm starting with IT help desk. Here's what I'm doing. Here's some of the roles that I'm looking at and like job postings. He's like, cool. I know someone at a tech company for one of those job postings that you just gave me. And so that was kind of my in, but I had to put in a lot of dedication. And I think we have a question on acclimation in a little bit, so I can dig into it some more.
We'll get into it more.
That's a really key piece is finding mentors, finding the unknowns, like what are the unknown rules, what's unspoken, and finding the people that'll help you navigate that.
Cool.
So.
Yeah, excited to get more into that.
Thanks.
Next on the panel, we have Rachel Kesley. Rachel, tell me a little bit about what you do for work.
Yeah, I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Sales Solutions Engineer for a company based out of Boulder called Arrived Inc. And we are a point of sale for beverage producers. So think breweries, cideries, distilleries, food, no food, a lot of food and beverage technology and reporting.
Cool. And just tell me a little bit about like, how did you get into that?
That's a great question to distill that into.
Actually, let's talk about where you came from before, because I think I am skipping ahead to questions.
So my I've kind of had three distinct careers up to this point. So I graduated from CU and was like, LSAT. I'm going to law school. I'm going to do that. And then, as one might study for the LSAT, quickly gets deterred. And I went to culinary school. And so I was a chef, a natural food chef and a vegan vegetarian chef for the first 10, 12 years of my career in Boulder, New York City, and here in Denver. And then, kind of went out on my own. I was an entrepreneur and business owner with a catering company, but had fallen in love with the craft beer boom here in Denver. And had a not so direct path, but into beer sales. And so from there, I was a director of sales and COO for a brewery here in town, and then went into sales for technology with Arrived, and then this is kind of my maybe second, third job role at Arrived.
Cool, very cool. All right, and then last on the panel, we have Kelly Hux. Kelly, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your job.
Yeah, so today I am a lead recruiter, or the only recruiter, at a very small startup called UI Flow. We're a no-code platform that involves a lot of things in the startup world. So talent acquisition, of course, the recruiting piece, building out recruiting operations, working with vendors, employee engagement, some employee engagement analytics. It's a good mix, a solid mix of things.
Cool, very cool. And I realized that I had the wrong card and I was asking some people the wrong questions. I was getting ahead of myself. Andrew called me out on
Yeah,
it
that's why I was a little
earlier.
confused. I was like,
I
hey, this is
know,
the next
it's okay.
question.
I'm
yeah.
a little
I like
confused,
rules
too.
a little. Yeah.
Where am I? What day is
Answer the
it?
questions,
It was good information. But we'll get in. There's more to the question that I wanted to ask. So I'm going to throw this out to Alex first. You talked a little bit about barista into Facebook. You also said that now you're doing fraud detection at Twilio. Tell me a little bit about how that original role has turned into your role today.
Yeah, like the original Facebook role.
Yeah, like what's your career journey? How have you used like your experience to get to the job that you're at?
Yeah, so when I joined Facebook, I was a contractor and I did content moderation, which just means I made sure all the ads on Facebook were legal and A-okay to be seen. They don't do a great job of that. But I learned a lot about how to basically look at risk and how to analyze the risk of accounts and users and their payment information. And that's what I did for Facebook for about 6 months. And then after that, I spent the next 3 years in support. And so in support, you are your customers. Like, support is the foundation of every company.
Yeah.
And as you get higher in a company, people start to talk about support less. But I think us as consumers, when we need to talk to PayPal support, they're our best friend. That's who we need. So I spent years in support getting to know customers and understanding why people use Twilio, why we're using email, why we use MMS, what makes our company unique. And then pairing both my customer experiences with my previous risk analytics that I did at Facebook kind of brought me into the fraud world at Twilio, where I'm literally assessing our customers and their risk and making sure that they're not getting compromised, and paying attention to their data to make sure that what they did today matches up with what they did a year ago, and to make sure that nobody's sneaking in and stealing information.
Yeah. I love how it kind of comes back to the customer, which is how you originally got into technology. It was like through literally a customer.
Customers, yeah, absolutely. Technology, a lot of people when they think tech company, it's, oh, I'm going to go code, or I'm going to go build an app. And that is, I feel like, such a small percentage of tech. Yeah. It's maybe 5 or 10% of engineers. Everybody else is, operations, accountants, supportability, all of these different roles that are actually building up the company. Engineers build the product. Everybody else is building up the reputation and giving the customer the confidence to use that product.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you. Awesome. And Andrew, so you said that you were looking for tech. You were trying to get into tech. It seems like Alex was fell into it a little bit. It was just somebody at Facebook was worked for me. You were a lot more intentional about it. Tell me a little bit about what you were doing before that and what kind of inspired you to make that move.
Yeah, I was actually a professional beekeeper before I got into tech. My degree is in entomology, which is the study of insects. I love systems, I love social hierarchy, I love complex things. So that fit kind of led into computers. I didn't see eye to eye with my employer at the time, and I was like, I need a different job, I need health insurance. I've never had a real job outside of agriculture, so what do I want to do? So I started studying for a certification. It's called the A+ cert. For those that know, it's the entry-level IT help desk certification. So I started looking for jobs, and I was like, what skills are needed here? And I basically just mimicked my resume on whatever all these jobs had, and I made sure I could at least talk about all the skills that were listed in these resumes. So I did some research. I was like, do I want to do this job? Is this the right fit for me? Tailored my resume to it, and then I was able to get into through a recommendation, right? So loose connections are really important. Lean on your friends, see who knows somebody. But once I was in, I think you were asking kind of career journey from there, or
a little bit about getting acclimated, using that first experience.
This first experience is going to be weird. You got to lean on other people. It's uncomfortable. You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to feel stupid. But that's okay, because everyone had to do that. It's just a lot of people may have done that earlier than you, and you're just coming in and getting to ask some of those questions. So that was a big struggle for me at first. And then once I realized, I actually know a lot of things, I just need to put a tech spin on it, right? So once I was in, it was really, what do I want to do next? I love to learn. I taught myself how to code. I got recruited internally by an engineering manager that saw some of my work. And from there, I moved into a part of tech called containerization, which is a whole can of worms that we don't have to get into. But I've been an engineer for, 8 years now. I started working for a startup in San Francisco. I found a technology I really liked, learned it as well as I could, sought that next job, worked there for a couple of years, and then I was actually recruited by Google and got to work on some of the coolest projects in the world. So that was really neat. But all of it was with customers. I was also started with customers. It's always been in service of others and helping others build things or change things. So getting acclimated is tough, though. Find a mentor, ask a lot of questions, try to come prepared with, at least understand the industry you're trying to get into in tech or the jargon of the role that you're looking to apply for. So.
Yeah, I think, like the mentor or a buddy, creating partnerships, I think that's something that I learned from my career in beer is like how to partner with people, how to engage with them and, like kind of a give and take. And when you bring that into a new environment, that's how you create those relationships where it's like, hey, I want to ask 1,000 stupid questions. I need to find somebody who will answer that.
Exactly.
For me.
Find your safe space, right?
Yeah.
Like find other people that are willing to invest time in you. They can see you're talented. They want to work with you on projects that you're working on. And it may not be your manager. It may not be your assigned onboarding buddy. It may be a peer or a different manager or somebody else. That's how I've navigated through my career is find your mentor, lean into them when they're willing to put in the time, and then see where it can get you next.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, for me, I came from craft beer, and so I was kind of known for enjoying craft beer. It turns out that there were some engineers who liked craft beer too, and so it was just kind of making relationships and being like, I worked pretty close to Jagged Mountain. And so it'd be like the end of a work day and be like, hey, we're all a little tired. Like, how about we just go over to Jagged Mountain and get a pint? And pretty soon, you give somebody a pint and you ask them what an API is. And 2 hours later, you're diagramming stuff on a napkin and people get really excited about it. So it's finding those safe spaces to dig in and ask those questions. It's awesome. Rachel, I would love to hear a little bit about how did you find out about your first tech role?
Yeah, that's a great question. It also comes back to relationships. So I also was going into tech from the craft beer world. I think there was a moment in the craft beer world that Laura and I were actually the same person to a lot of people.
I had a shorter haircut.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was like, oh, it's a woman at Renegade that has a short haircut.
Yeah, exactly.
We were one person.
Wanting to differentiate a little bit, but through that world, there's a lot of folks who move into craft beer from tech and from the craft beer world into tech. And so through that, I knew somebody who had gone to work at Arrived, and they were hiring a salesperson. And I had just run a sales team and was intrigued and did a little bit of research on the point of sale, having used point of sales in different capacities in my life. And, I think that connection got me an interview, and then those conversations got me, kind of the starting role that I had at that job.
Cool. How is it for you getting acclimated from beer sales into tech sales?
Yeah, very different. It's same and different, right? So I was talking to a lot of business owners that owned breweries, and that's where I was coming from. So I knew, I know how to run a food and beverage business, so I had a lot in common with them off the bat. Sales in general, I mean, if any of you have been in sales, it's about establishing trust up front. And so knowing how to talk and how to communicate and leaning into pain points and having, being empathetic to those conversations about what those folks are going through was a leg up for me, especially when it came to technology. I will say when I first started, I was like, API who? Had a lot of questions about how to set things up and figure it out and do video calls and things like that. And that was all, pre-pandemic, and then all of a sudden the world shut down. And so it was very different. But it was still just about building relationships and talking about value add to people who have a pain point. And that was the same from beer too, so.
Awesome.
Also, APIs are application programming interfaces, if you were wondering. It's how two computers can talk to each other. It's like my whole job.
Here's the deal. I Googled what is an API a while ago, and it was like application programming, and I was like, that still means nothing to me. Like that
Two things
still means
communicating.
nothing.
That's all it is.
But
it's
yeah,
a phone line.
we're not going to get into tech jargon right now. But
I at least had to do
guys-
it. We didn't define it yet. You know, you
part
got to
of,
do
like
it.
technology infrastructure is APIs. So that is something that, maybe that'll be the next talk is what the F is an API.
Let me buy it.
All right, so next question. So getting a job it's all about telling your story and pitching your skills. If you have a different background than tech, they're probably going to be expecting tech skills, like knowing what an API is. Any recommendations from this panel on like how do you take your colorful resume and weave it together into like a cohesive story that you can actually tell either in a resume or in an interview? And so I'll throw it to Rachel first.
Yeah, I love that question. I think when you look at what you've accomplished within your career, think about it in the bigger picture of what did you learn? How did you navigate conflict? What ad did you bring to your team, your business? And that's valuable for any company, anywhere. And especially within technologies, having a lot of different backgrounds, personalities, lived experiences at the table only make products better. And so realizing, hey, I have a very specific skill set, but maybe that's like my background was, chef. And so if I can navigate a hot room with ticket times and interesting personalities that had knives and fire, taking that and going into other scenarios is like, hey, okay, there's something to be said about that. It's not just I know how to, wrangle the line. It's, okay, how do I navigate a lot of different personalities into a shared goal? How do I, a conflict happened. How did I navigate that so that makes me a more valuable person for a team? How can I take my background and whatever technology you're looking to apply for? What's your background in that? Do you have anything that you could bring to the table that maybe they haven't thought of and things like that? So I would always look at what you learn through your different experiences, because when you kind of unveil, what you actually did at those jobs, the takeaways of, kind of your interpersonal skills and even, networking and things like that are valuable across the board no matter what you do. Technology is not surgery, so, hopefully nobody's going into, brain surgery with my background, but, that I think looking at what you've learned through the way is the best.
Yeah, I mean, good with knives, but maybe a little bit more skill needed for brain surgery. Andrew, what do you think about that question? How do you weave together your maybe incongruent experience into a job resume?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a wild ride. Beekeeper, IT help desk. Then I was an engineer at a startup out of San Francisco that was funded for like $100 million. I was like, wow, I can't believe I got this job. And your pay definitely increases, so that's an important piece. But telling the story and like kind of weaving through that, and my role has been different at every job. I've never done the same job twice. I'm very much a generalist. I like to learn a lot of different things and piece them together. Kind of weaving my journey, that was what you're saying, right? Like, yeah.
How do you tell that story?
How do you tell your story, right? So I kind of break the conventions. I make my resume really colorful. I make it stand out. But I do put really important. I know the recruiter over here is like, what?
Kelly's the last one that's going to talk about this, so don't worry.
So I do things unconventional, because that's who I am. But that's what my value is. I don't think in the same way. I don't do things the same way. So I have a colorful resume. It has a large block of text at the top. But it tells everything you could ever want to know about me. Like, you have a question? Cool, it's already there. There's a reference link. It goes to a website or a page where I'm, talking about something or talking about bees or whatever the case was. So it's really translating, what are you good at? What do you like doing? And then is there a tech job for that thing? And the answer is yes. Tech has pretty much every kind of job you could ever imagine. It just has different jargon. So you need to kind of get familiarized with what that jargon is. and I know we'll get into all the different types of roles, but
Yeah.
weaving the story, you just got to take what you're good at and put it into the context for that job. At least that's been my experience.
And yeah, Kelly's the last one to
She's
speak
like,
on it.
colorful resume, oh, God.
We have not been ignoring Kelly on the end. It's the best for last. I mean, you look at resumes all day. A lot of your job is doing, like, especially those initial interviews, like those first calls, first touches. What advice can you give from a recruiter who interacts with the space every single day? Like, what can we learn from your experience?
Yeah, so colorful resumes. I don't mind for your role because you're dev ed, so I expect you to be a little creative. But do make it easy to read because you read a lot all day.
It's easier. It's easier.
But in terms of weaving your different experiences and looking for a new role, so I'll go back. I actually moved from higher education recruiting. So I used to recruit international students, be in like Colombia and the Middle East, talking to 15, 16, 17-year-olds. Very different from recruiting engineers that are usually not 20, but like 30, 40, 50, 60, and on. And in my own transition, what I did was actually a lot of informational interviews. I don't know if people do those anymore, because I realized I wasn't getting calls, and I was like, okay, I have this experience, I've reviewed resumes, I've managed working with department heads, managing decisions, all that stuff, but I didn't know how to communicate it in a language that a recruiter in a different space, it would make sense for them. Hopefully this is making sense because I feel myself like talking over my words. But so I spent a lot of time talking to people, learning their jargon, picking up on that, and then translating that into my own resume with my experience. So I think that's something that's pretty big is like, okay, I'm making a change. They might not speak the same way in this new space. How do they speak? And how can I incorporate that into my resume? That's definitely a key tip if you're like cold applying to things. I'd say if you're doing like the heavy networking as you're looking and building your story, practice your story to someone or to a mirror. Say it out loud multiple times just so that it makes sense and you have it like a robot when someone asks you, what have you done? What are you looking to do? You know, boom, 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 boom. So that's just automatic. Because I feel like sometimes when I talk to people that are transitioning, they kind of like don't know exactly what it is they want to do. That's why it's good to do those informational interviews to really figure it out from other people, and then the practice piece so that you're pretty solid when you are talking to hiring managers, recruiters, networking, etc. Yeah, I think those are.
Yeah, I think that's really
solid
great
tips,
advice,
yeah.
for sure. I mean, I get the question all the time if I'm applying for a job, you know, like they'll look at my LinkedIn or they'll look at my resume and they'll be like, Director of Operations at a brewery, product manager, like make that make sense to me. And I think it is like the more I practice it, the more I come into that being like, of course you want to hire a former brewery operations manager. Like why wouldn't I be the perfect candidate for this? You know, like you practice it, you say it, write it down, tell it to your friends, be open to feedback from people, and the more you get comfortable just like saying it out loud, the easier it'll be to just like put it on a resume or respond to it in an interview. You know, like it's the confidence and kind of being like, oh yeah, of course I'll tell that story again. That really helps it stand out.
Yeah. Confidence definitely goes a long way. I'll add one other thing. Had a friend recently that's transitioning from leading a real estate company to wanting to go into software engineering. Looked at his resume and I was like, hey, this is like a lot of management. Do you still want to do management? Because when I talked to you, it didn't seem like it. So maybe take some of that stuff off your resume. If you know, like, I don't want to do management anymore. I managed a restaurant. I managed a brewery. Not interested in managing any person, dealing with any HR issues. Take it off. It's okay to take it off. It's not going to like go against you or anything. But just make sure you add on what you really want to do and what's transferable.
Very interesting. Thanks for that, Kelly. Cool. So another question that I'm going to throw back to you, Kelly. What do you think about certifications? Certifications can be expensive, whether we're talking like boot camp, or like there's project management certifications, there's product management, there's even like internships or kind of like level up opportunities that companies offer. What do you think of those opportunities?
Yeah, so since we're in the business school, I'll give a business school answer.
Thank you.
And the answer is that it depends. Yeah, so on certifications, some are really good, some aren't so good, and it also depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to move into like project management, it might make sense to do like a PMP type certification. If you're trying to move into HR and tech, depending what you want to do in HR, it might make sense to do like a SHRM, but you can learn a lot of that on the spot and have a company sponsor you. Like there's a lot more flexibility with that, so it might not make sense to do a certification. Looking at boot camps, so I actually used to run the Hatch apprenticeship program at Twilio. It was an amazing program. Unfortunately, they got rid of it. But it was a really great program to get your start as a software engineer, have like a really safe environment with mentorship. Apprenticeships are great. Internships are great if you can get one. When you think about apprenticeships, remember that they're not just for software engineers. A lot of companies now are creating apprenticeships for other positions, whether it's HR, sales, product. There's so many out there. It's just doing the research, networking, and trying to get into one. General on boot camps, again, it's like, I don't know, they can be hit or miss. Boot camps are also expensive. I'm kind of cheap. And I don't know if I want to spend $15,000 or like commit to paying back $15,000 on a boot camp. But I also know that I'm the type of person that if I like say I'm gonna do this, and that, I will get distracted and not end up doing this, and that. So having the structure of an actual program would be good for someone like me. So like think about your learning style as well. But like I said at the beginning, it really just kind of depends on what it is you're trying to do and how you learn.
Andrew, what do you think about that? Certifications, classes?
Yeah,
things?
so that first cert I talk about to get my IT help desk job, I actually never took the exam. I only studied for it and put that I was studying for it on my resume. The hiring manager actually called me because he was like, you got a referral from somebody that's really good at this company. But I called you because of the bees. And I was like, all right, cool, I'll talk about bees, but I would really want this job. And he was like, all right, cool. So he started asking me questions, and I nailed it, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, you want to come on site? And went from there. So I actually never took that cert. The only certification I ever took was because I was required to by my job. That was at Google, and they wanted to know that I could deliver on a certain set of architectures with customers, so I had to get a certification. So I would say once you're in, if it's required, get it. If you're looking for a job, it's required, obviously you're going to go try to get it. Not all roles need it. I think the learning is what really matters. Can you talk about it? Can you do it? Since I'm engineering, do you have a portfolio? Like your GitHub account and the things that you have there are more important than if you got some certification that says you can do it, right? So it varies. Like I hate certifications personally. I actually didn't get a minor in my degree out of my university because I didn't want to do the last class in the paperwork, right? I was like, I know enough about this, I'm good, right? So, but I think it is important, right? Like if it's your first job getting into tech, it could prove that you know what you're talking about and it get you into that first interview. It's about getting that first call and proving that you can discuss and talk about these things at the necessary level. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think these aren't great answers because it's a maybe, but they're good answers. I think that's what it is. I think it kind of depends. My first job, I didn't have any certifications for. I did end up getting, and we'll do a promo to our sponsors, I got an AWS certification, AWS Cloud Practitioner. Most of the internet runs on AWS hosted services. And so it was a lot about like learning what those services are, learning what they do, and it really helped me understand all of the acronyms my engineers were throwing out. Like they're like, oh, like SQS and S3 buckets and stuff like that. And then I finally had like concrete knowledge to be like, oh, I know what an S3 bucket does. I can now ask a question about what you're saying and not just ask you to define it. And so it did help me. It helped me be more confident. I think some of it is like what you were saying, Andrew. I think some of it, what you were saying was confidence, is like being able to talk about it, like being able to say, oh, I do know this, and maybe it's because you studied, or maybe it's because you actually took the exam.
Yeah, take your exams, folks. Take your exams. We're in this college building. I did get my degree. I did pass. Get your masters, your MBAs.
But no, good answer. So if anybody has more questions about that afterwards, if you're looking at a specific certification, like happy to talk more about it, or like even ask other people in that job whether or not they have the certification, and it might help give you some clarity. All right. So I think this is a really important question, or an important topic to discuss here. We're going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. Getting into tech from a non-tech background means that you're going to deal with imposter syndrome. I guess I've been comforted, just to tell a little bit of my own journey. Every time I started a new job, I would go through a new wave of imposter syndrome, a new wave of like, they think I know enough, but somebody's going to find out that I don't. They're going to find me out. They're going to ask me a question I won't know the answer, and they'll think that I'm really dumb. I've actually talked to my boss about this, and my boss has been in technology since the early 2000s. He's worked at Ancestry.com and GitHub and all of these big companies, and he told me, he's like, it's part of the job. Like, it's part of anything. It's part of life. You're going to feel like an imposter. Like it's something that you just kind of have to get used to. And so kind of just putting that out there, assuming that we will all feel imposter syndrome, what are some ways that we deal with it? So I'm going to throw that one to Alex. How do you deal with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I still have it. I have it all the time. For me, what works best for me, and like I said, I didn't do the college thing. I don't have any certifications. I've been at Twilio for 5 years. I don't know what I want to do there. I've had 3 different roles, and I still don't know like my path. And the thing that helps me is to know that that's okay. Instead of being fearful of having imposter syndrome, I'm somebody who has recently learned to lean into it and use it less as something negative, but actually as a tool to growing. And I think if you go into tech, and I might be lucky, Twilio is an amazing place. I love it. But I know I can go into any meeting versus with my boss. I had to sit down with my CEO last week at a happy hour, and I said, hey, Jeff, I don't really understand what I do. It was wild. But here's what I do, and I am doing the best with what I can do with what I have right now and today. And tomorrow you might teach me something else and I can do better. But for right now, this is where I'm at. This is what I can do. Is this okay? And just constantly checking in with yourself and also a mentor, or for me, it's just my boss. Like, I'm pretty close with my manager. So being like, hey, boss man, can you just clarify this for me? Can you confirm? I need a little bit of confidence in this. That is how I have kind of taken on imposter syndrome and turned it into more of a tool. So yeah, if you can get comfortable taking feedback and just saying, hey, this is what I know, 99% chance I could be wrong, but this is what I'm going to give it a shot. That's what I've seen in tech grow more careers than saying, I know everything and I'm going to do it. If you can be humble and just say, I'm going to try, that's really what all of my past managers and everybody at Twilio is looking for. Like, just give it a shot. Just try, and don't be scared to fail. So that's kind of mine.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alex. Rachel, what are your thoughts on imposter syndrome?
Many. I think we could have probably a whole course line on imposter syndrome, and it's a super important topic. And as Alex said, everybody has it. Even the most confident person in the room, at some point in their life, probably at some point in that day, had some level of imposter syndrome. I think the flipping the script on the fake it till you make it conversation and really leaning into asking those questions, finding a mentor. Imposter syndrome can be very isolating, and knowing that it can be very isolating, asking the question to whoever you feel comfortable to. Hopefully that's a manager, maybe it's a peer, maybe it's somebody on a different team, maybe it's somebody else in your life. But having those conversations and really leaning into language on how you talk to yourself, and saying, instead of at our company, and I'm going to say this because one of my mentors is here in the room, and she led a DEI talk about imposter syndrome. And so one thing that came out of that talk that we had internally was making sure you're using the right, most positive language with yourself and with those around you. And be kind, right? Be kind and it's hard, be as kind to yourself as you would to somebody else in the room. And that's going to give you a little bit more boost of confidence internally to create those questions and things like that. The other thing is that, again, you can't make everybody happy in the room, right? I think I think I have it on a towel that, stop trying to make everybody happy. You're not tequila. Lean into that and make sure that hey, you have standards for yourself, you have standards for those around you, and just communicating and asking the questions is extremely helpful in navigating something that you're probably never going to fully get away from, is the reality too.
Yeah, embrace it. I've heard people even say, like, imposter syndrome means that you're pushing yourself into your next phase of growth, and that's a good sign. Like you're doing it right. If you're feeling like you're not quite there, that means you're growing. So
yeah, being uncomfortable is really important because that's how you stretch yourself and get to that next role or move into tech from a non-tech background, right? Like you have to kind of be uncomfortable with the pace that you're gonna have to learn it first. And you said something that was in my mind the whole time is be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself.
That was the biggest thing for me throughout my career is like, I'm here for a reason. I passed all the interviews. I made it through the checks and balances. I'm here for, just being kind to myself. Like, I would say things to myself that I wouldn't say to my peers. So just changing that language was really important. And I think that helps the most for me with imposter syndrome. It still does rear its ugly head every now and then. I'm like, wow, am I the right person for this particular project? Okay. But then you do it, right? Or you ask for help if you need it. So.
Well, and I think too, something to note is that, my first job into tech was something I was very comfortable with, was sales. And then as my role evolves, the more and more deep into the rabbit hole of imposter syndrome I get, because it is that stretch of, it's not muscle memory. And it's like all of a sudden, director of strategic partnerships. Okay, let's talk about that strategic partnership, and it's like, I know how to talk about these things. And then being in those rooms, you just have to remember, I am here, part of it is luck, but mostly is the hard work that you're putting into it.
So a lot of imposter syndrome is feeling like you're different from everybody else, and kind of being insecure about that. Let's switch it around and be like, what about like having a diverse background or anything else about like you as a person sets yourself out in like a really positive way, like gives you the ability to like stand out and get opportunities. And I'm gonna throw this to Andrew first.
All right, so I've heard this word mentioned a few times, but it's one of the biggest things that's changed my life and my career in general. Empathy, right? Like, I'm an engineer. You don't see that a lot in engineering teams, if I'm being honest. So if you're bringing an outside skill set, in my case, it's empathy or communication skills or working with customers. I started working when I was probably not legally able to, just because I wanted money in my pocket. So I've been working my whole life, and it's always been in service of others, whether it's, like with customers, right? And I've kept that throughout my engineering career. And you just have to bring whatever you like doing into the tech space. If you hate doing the job you get in tech, you should probably do a different job in tech. Or if you really don't enjoy studying the things that you're going to be doing in the job, probably not the right thing. But I guess, coming back to the question.
What makes you stand out?
Yeah, sorry. Systems work for me. I just think in a little bit different way from a lot of folks. And I brought that into my work. I've put it into my engineering roles, into the solutions that I build, into the way that I communicate those things with other people around me. So in my job, it really is my communication and empathy, because I work with customers, I work with sales teams, I work with marketing, implementation teams, product teams. So that's really the skill set I've leaned into. It's just an extra that I can code and all those other things, right? I could probably still have a similar job with this skill set, just without the engineering piece inside the tech world.
Totally.
Like an implementations type role where you're helping a customer, add your software to their product or whatever the case may be.
And it's even like seeking out those opportunities to be like, okay, I'm not going to take on the most technical project, but if there's an opportunity to lead a feedback session, I can do that. Like I have these skills and the kind of like volunteering, setting yourself up to showcase your talents in that way, I think can really help. Rachel, anything that you've done that helps you kind of like embrace being different and standing out?
I think my nervous tick leans to humor. And so I think that has helped me a ton in sales in general and kind of making people trust me and leaning on my background from food and beverage. And I've happened to land in a role in a company that aids that particular subset of industry. And so, knowing that I know exactly what you're going through. This is how I would utilize this particular piece of what we offer to help streamline your business. And so making sure that, really lean on, not shy away from everything I've done in my career, because it is a lot of patchwork and it's different. It's food and beverage heavy and being able to be like, okay, these are the things that I accomplished in those spaces, and then how can I transfer that to being consultative within the sales process, and now within partnerships, I can look at it through the lens of, okay, this is if I was utilizing this product, what other company integration or allied trade partner would I want this company to partner with to make my life easier? And I think that's something from a unique lens that, I can really identify with our end user base to then, go after who we might partner with from a strategic level that probably sets me slightly apart from some other people.
Cool. All right, got a few more last questions here. We are a group of people that work at tech companies. Only one of us writes software. There's a lot of jobs. We kind of mentioned it before. Software engineer is a sliver of the tech space. Let's just socialize some different jobs and like some skills associated with that. And Kelly, I'd love to hear your perspective of like, what are some different jobs in technology that people might not be aware of?
Everything. I mean, anything that any other company has, tech has. So whether it's sales, marketing, communications, HR, legal, what else is there? Benefits. I'm talking HR now. Solutions engineering, developer advocate, which kind of straddles like engineering and marketing. Like literally anything. Contracts, like. Yeah.
How might somebody like?
Yeah.
How might somebody learn about like what does it actually look like to be in strategic partnerships? Like how does somebody figure that out?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple different ways you can figure out what different roles look like, whether it's strategic partnerships or something else. One is going to be like just honestly doing a Google search, looking at different resumes and seeing what does this job entail. If they have percentages of like what the day might look like, that's great. Another way is talking to people that are in that position. So again, like just reaching out. People usually want to talk about themselves. So if you go in like low effort call, most people will say yes to that, like 15-minute call. So that's another way. Just researching and talking to people.
I've definitely had people reach out to me on LinkedIn being like, oh, like I'm from University of Wisconsin as well, and I'm looking at product management. Would you be willing to talk to me? And as long as I have time, I say yes. It's a flattering thing to me for somebody to be like, hey, I want to know what your job is. And so, yeah, like people do like to talk about themselves. It means putting yourself out there a little bit, but going on LinkedIn and like sending a few messages and seeing if any bite. It could be like that informational interview you were talking about before. That could be how you learn how to cater your experience, learn about the job, and even learn about the language used to represent yourself in an interview for that.
Yeah, for sure. Another place to look at will just be like professional organizations, community organizations. Get to know the people within those. Those will eventually become your network if you're interested in that role and want to move forward with it. So don't forget like connections. I know like we've all just experienced COVID and not having people and like not touching. Sorry, I didn't ask to touch you, so I won't touch you. And not touching. But like people connections are super important in life in general. So don't forget like you're not annoying someone. If they are, they'll probably tell you, or like act a way that shows you that you are. So don't worry about knowing anyone. Just go for it and talk to people.
One thing I might add too is if you don't know where to start within that, and LinkedIn can be overwhelming, is whatever you do now, there's technology that helps facilitate whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So look at your business, whatever that is, your industry, who you might be interacting with that's in technology, and just go, okay, point of sale provider is top of mind, right? So just reach out and say, hey, what job? Look at job openings. Ask the tech that's coming in, hey, how did you get into this? Would you mind if I call you later? Like you're in contact with people who are in contact with technology on a daily. So.
Yep. Hospitality, education, healthcare, like those all have tech companies that serve them. Yeah. You can find a way to have your kind of niche experience in that area, like working in craft beer and then being able to sell to people that run craft breweries. You can really find your way there. Okay, last question, and we're going to do a little Q&A, so if anybody would like to ask the panel questions, we have a podium over there. Feel free to move over there now. We are coming into this talk assuming that you want to work in technology. Andrew, you mentioned a few things, good pay, benefits, that's what drew me to getting a job in technology. Denver's getting more and more expensive. How do I afford this place? Why would somebody not want to work in technology? Is there anything that somebody might be like, ooh, not for me, that you can think of? And Kelly, I think you might have something in mind.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a recruiter, and the year has been really rough for recruiters. So first thing that comes to my mind is stability. Everyone kind of knows, I guess, tech layoffs have been happening across the world. So that's a thought like, oh, do I want to stay in this industry? Do I maybe want to go to like aerospace or something where they don't really fire people in my role? So that's definitely been a thought. Another reason you might want to reconsider is if you're trying to switch to tech because you're running away from something you don't like in your current industry. I say that because people everywhere, okay? It's just gonna be the same SHIT, different place, okay? Like tech companies still have issues, we still have bureaucracy, we still have red tape. So if you're running away from that, maybe don't switch to tech just to get away from one thing, but switch to tech because you really like this company, you like their culture, you like what they're doing, not just because like, oh, I hate this place, I gotta go to tech.
Yeah.
So really think about it.
In my 6 years in technology, I've seen 5 layoffs and I've lost my job once. It happens. Also, one thing I would throw in there, especially in like the engineering R&D product space, it's a lot about like critiquing. I know some people have been really successful in that space, like coming from art or music, where it's like you're a musician and then you play your thing and then all of your peers tell you how terribly you did. That helps you get used to it, but it is something to get used to, and I think a lot of people who might not like to have that experience would not find a lot of happiness in that job. And so, those are questions to ask when you're doing these informational interviews, is like, hey, why might somebody hate your job, and see if you resonate with those things, and whether or not you really want to invest your time exploring that career. All right, we're gonna go to our Q&A.
Hi, my name's George. I did the thing. I have a background as bonkers as a lot of yours. And I went to Turing here in Denver, and I learned how to be a React engineer, and I conned my way into a job as an engineer, and now that job has been restructured to Portugal. And so my question is, looking for a second job with a little bit of tech experience and then all of the rest of my adult life, how do I balance, or how would you suggest that I balance, or anybody balance, the new tech experience with my time as an opera singer and running a pet cemetery and being a chef? Like, again, crazy stuff.
That's awesome. You should be up here soon, next year, right?
We're gonna chat. But how do you balance as
Yeah.
you're sort of moving with a little bit of experience? Thank you.
I would say I kept beekeeping on my resume until this last job, just because there's so much stuff on there now, and I make it colorful and put word chunks and things like that. So I would say you want to focus on the projects you work on. What was the outcome of the projects that you worked on? What did you learn? What were some scenarios that you ran into where you maybe had to learn a new library or a new, write a new function, or, I don't want to get too deep into engineering speak, but really focus on the things you did in that job, the key things you picked up in the coding camp. I think that's what, I'm not sure, Turing, is that what it was?
Turing.
Okay. And if you can, lean on one of the managers. Like if you had a good rapport with the manager or somebody at the company, have them vouch for you. Say like, hey, had it not been layoff season in tech, we would have kept him because of X, Y, and Z. So I would say reach out to your loose connections, talk to that manager, and really, I don't know how long you've been looking, but beef up your GitHub, put some cool projects in there. Even if they're not practical, it shows that you are active, you're building things, you're learning things, and you're building with the framework that you chose to learn. So happy to talk to you afterward. But yeah, thank you for the question. I think it was George.
That's a perfect answer. You're hired.
All right, yes, even with my colorful resume, awesome.
No, yeah, I totally agree. Keep it on your resume. Like you said, keep building, keep those connections going. Definitely love that you said highlight the metrics and your accomplishments. A lot of people do like task on their resume. No. We want to see results. So make sure that you are highlighting that. But yeah, other than that, everything Alex said was spot on.
And I'll throw in one more.
One of those A names, Andrew.
It's fine. Same.
Oh, Alex, do you want to go?
Oh,
Yes.
no, no,
Okay. I love to answer at least one question in an interview about, like, I love to give one beer answer to kind of tie it all together. Like, a lot of the answers I'll give is like, oh, as a product manager, I did this. As a product manager, I did this. Here's a story I can tell about being a product manager. But I like to throw at least one story in about beer to be like, I've always been this person. And being good at this career before has made me good at my career now. And so it's like sprinkling it in to validate that experience and say, this does make me better at this technology career, but also I can give you proven numbers, adoption numbers, efficiency, things like that, to actually say I'm proven successful in this field as well. All right, next question.
Yeah, so my name is Ryan. Laura and I actually worked together about 5 years ago. I myself, in a week and a half, am transitioning to an IT company. And the way it's been described to me is that their training is a lot like drinking from a fire hose. So what I would love to get the thoughts of is that when you are onboarding, what do you prioritize as far as information that you want to hit the ground running on?
That's a great question. Who hasn't heard the fire hose thing before? I feel like every company's like, get ready for the fire hose. Alex, what do you think about the fire hose?
Oh man, Twilio is nothing but fire hoses. I just onboarded the team in 2 weeks, like fully, to like start ramping up, and it was fire hose to a new level. But honestly, and I wish somebody had told me this when I started at Twilio. When I started at Twilio, I didn't know about APIs. I worked at a company that went under because it just went under, and I worked at support. So I spent my first year at Twilio just kind of struggling, and I wish somebody had told me in onboarding, like, rather than focusing on grasping everything, build your network so you know who to ask questions to.
Yeah.
And I tell this to my boss now. I don't know everything. I just know where information lives. I know who knows what. And that has taken me further at my job now than being talked at during those first 2 weeks trying to absorb everything. So build your network. That's my thing.
I think that's great advice. That's exactly what I would say. Cool.
I would agree. Depends on each company. Some onboarding's good and they help you and they're like, nobody's going to care what you do for 3 months. Good luck. Like that's really kind of when it happens. If it's a new role and you haven't done it before, people are hopefully going to be kind. At least in my career, people have been nicer and nicer over the years, especially to new folks that aren't from tech backgrounds. So I would say make sure you understand what's important for you to be good at, and then maybe focus in that area and maybe not worry about the things that are kind of like extraneous to that. And ask your boss for help too. Like, hey, there was 800,000 documents thrown at me today. Like, what's most important, right? So.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Do you want to respect timing for the space? And then also hang out with us afterwards.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian. First off, kudos to all you on your journey. It really resonated with me a lot, having come from a non-traditional background into working in tech sales, essentially. So I think what I wanted to kind of hear from you all, and I think for folks in this room who are perhaps founders, entrepreneurs, or leaders in a position perhaps to hire or grow your teams, do you all have any tangible examples of how being from a non-traditional background either benefited your companies or maybe made an impact to them down the line that maybe they weren't quite expecting when they brought you on?
That's a great question. Anybody got any thoughts on that?
I have a live example of a coworker right now. His name is Khalil. I won't give his last name, but he comes from a non-traditional background. He did go through a code camp, but he immigrated. He has he has some family members here, but he taught himself how to code, took a boot camp, ended up in an official mentorship program, an internship program called Hack Diversity, based out of Boston and New York. I mentored people in that program. And he's actually the best engineer I've ever worked with. He doesn't know it yet, but wow, he walks circles around everybody. He's just so good. And it's because he thinks differently from all the other engineers with computer science degrees that are around him. They all kind of have like the same way of solving the problems, and he doesn't do it in the same way. So I would say, if you are hiring people, maybe look at people with different backgrounds, because you're not gonna get the same run of the mill, like, oh, this, if we're talking about an engineer or HR person or somebody that's, been doing it for a long time, you can get somebody with a lot of preconceived notions about how things should be done. And I think you won't necessarily get that if you bring someone in who has tangential skills that they've then worked on and been diligent about to move into that tech space. So yeah, I would say you're not going to get somebody who's thinking the same way as everybody else around. That's the key difference.
Completely agree. Cool. Well, I think that runs out of our time today. Feel free to stick around and ask us questions, and then we'll be migrating up to the daily happy hour taking place just a block up at the headquarters. HQ is doing a happy hour. So if you don't catch us here, in 5 to 10 minutes, we'll go up there. So thank you, everybody. Take care.
Everybody.